Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Kalanati. Today I'm going to give you my super casual thoughts on Dune by Frank Herbert, which I just reread in the month of June for Paul from A Common Touch of Fantasies Dune and Jude read-along, and I cut out my rambly thoughts from my weekly wrap-up and put it in the separate video, so I had a bit more time to talk about it, because I do have I had more thoughts about it now that I've reread it, so here's what I have to say about Dune. This was just really great. This was a reread for me. I read it for the first time back in 2008, and I was a very different reader 7, 8 years ago, and I had never read any other classic science fiction. In fact, this was one of the very first adult science fiction novels I ever read, so I had no idea of the context of how dated it might be. Just, there are all sorts of things in this that I now read it and I go, yes, this is a 1960s science fiction novel. But that being said, it holds up really well. I mean, this is a science fiction classic that I understand why it's called a classic. I read it and I'm like, this is the story of Dune. It is classic. It is part of popular culture in a way. It's not going away anytime soon. But I did find there were certain things that I was more critical of. I found to be a bit more negative. Overall, though, I love the story in this, the plot. Like I said, it's classic. It's the story of Paul Atreides, It's not the complete story because it's first book in a series, but it stands pretty well on its own. I liked Lady Jessica a lot. I didn't like Paul that much in this. I don't remember really loving him when I read it for the first time, but I was a bit turned off by how cold he was becoming, detached he was becoming by the end of the story, which is probably part of a point that Herbert was making, but it made it so hard to care about him and what he was doing, and I thought it was rather unfair in his relationships, especially with people like Lady Jessica, with Chani, and stuff like that. I still love Gurney Halleck. I still love Stilgar. The thing is that I didn't care so much for was that it really bothered me that the Harkonnens, the bad guys, the house that's fighting against House Atreides, all of the Harkonnens are almost over-the-top evil. It's not just like their badness is established. No, Herbert is constantly throwing things in, like just making it worse and worse and worse. And it's like, this is getting almost cartoonish. This is like cartoon villain type stuff. And I could get some of it, but what really bothered me was the Baron Harkonnen is famously a very fat man, but he's also homosexual. And it's turned into this effeminate homosexuality, sexually perverse thing. It's about being evil. And I don't like that connection. I think that's a very, very dated connection to say, your bad guy is gay and likes, groping effeminate pretty boys. I was cringing. I was just like, this is not to my modern sensibilities. So I could have really done with none of that, less of that. Yeah. And the religious mysticism is a complicating factor as well. I think that contributes a lot to why I don't like Paul Atreides as a character, because he's feeding into this mysticism, and it's mystical. I'm not into the mystical stuff. And I think it's seeding for a long-term plot or thread throughout the rest of the series, but it bothered me more rereading it this time. As a kid, I don't remember having any reaction really to the race consciousness, the ability to see the future and the past and the present stuff. It just sort of was. And now I'm reading it thinking, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's not science fictional enough for me. It's not science enough for me. It's very religious feeling. It's very mystical and almost like something I'd pull out of a fantasy book and not a science fiction book. So I'm going to try to read the next 2 books in the series, which are Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, because I'm very, very curious about how the Children of Dune miniseries by Sci-Fi combined them, I guess. I've heard that miniseries is a combination of the events from the second and third books, and I really enjoy that miniseries. I've watched it many times, and I've always thought that I'd like to know what the real story is supposed to be like. What did they change in it? So I will keep reading at some point. I'll pick up Dune Messiah and Children of Dune and see if the mysticism keeps bothering me, or if it becomes more, if it makes more sense. Yeah. So that is Dune. Highly recommended, even if you're not into reading classic sci-fi. This is a great science fiction book and well worth reading.